Our greatest journey is not conquering the mountains, the sea, or space. It's to become fully alive, to have faced adversity and mowed it down, to have stood still in the face of our monsters and watched as they vanished into the ether. And it's this journey that calls to the hero within every single one of us. Heroes like Mohsin Charania. Mohsin Charania first burst onto the scene playing online poker under the pseudonym Chicago Cards, and he later transferred to the live tournament scene, winning more than 6.2 million playing live tournaments, and he's one of only 8 people to win the Triple Crown of European Poker Tour, World Poker Tour, and World Series of Poker bracelet. How did he do it? Let's find out. Ladies and gentlemen, today's hero, Mohsin Charania. Mohsin Charania, how you doing, my man?
Good. Lockdown, just like everyone else.
Yeah, I mean, you cannot start without asking, but, how are you handling the whole thing?
Surprisingly, pretty good. I think I tweeted like a month ago that like I'm kind of built for this because before 2011 and even after when I lived in Toronto, you have Scoop and F-Tops and all that stuff. So like being in a house and ordering food for delivery and playing poker kind of just prepares you for something like this. Also, personality-wise, I'm like the king of trying not to make plans and then finding ways to get out of plans. So this is kind of like the perfect excuse where I don't have to like make shit up. And I never pick up my phone, so I don't have to get off the phone with anyone.
Talk about that a little bit, because that sounds a little bit familiar, actually. Do you get yourself in spots where you'll agree to go out to a party or something, and then when the day comes, you're thinking of ways how to get out? Like
in 3 weeks in advance, I'll agree to do something, and I'll be like, we'll figure it out later. And then like at that time, I'll be like, man, I would really rather just be sitting on the couch watching sports, or now I'm just watching old sports, like I'm watching like 90s Bulls games. But like I'm like, you know what, I'd rather get a lot more joy on my couch, like just watching sports and like ordering a pizza or like Thai food or whatever, like Indian food, than like have to go to this party, because I am not very good at like forced interactions, like social interactions with people that I don't know, because I don't show much interest in conversations that I don't like being involved in. So like there's all those memes of like the person at the party who'd rather be sleeping in bed, and I'm probably the definition of that. But I'm also the definition of agreeing to do something like I'll be like, I'll go to like EPT Barcelona. I'll agree to it in May. And then like in August, I'll like call the airline and see if I can get airline credit, because like I don't want to go to EPT Barcelona. It sounded nice like 4 months ago.
So this is more than just going out on a Saturday night with your mates. This also impinges on your live tournament career. You don't like?
Oh yeah. I book flights like 4 months in advance, like refundable flights, especially for American tournaments, like on Southwest or something, or if I have airline status. And then I'll probably take 25% of them. Like the WPT has like 12 stops or 15 stops. I've been to Borgata maybe once. I haven't been to Florida in a long time. Like I kind of just agree to do it. And I'll even agree to like, I'll be like, oh yeah, Marvin, I'll totally stay with you at Borgata. And then like when the time comes, I'm like, yeah, you're gonna have to find a roommate, because there's no way I'm hopping on a 6-hour flight. And because they're all refundable, I'm ready to like, I'm gone. I'll also go to tournament stops. Like I went to EPT Barcelona one year. I played the high roller, and then I just left and didn't want to play the rest of the series because I just didn't want to be there anymore. And so I just like paid the difference fee, and I went to Sweden actually for like 10 days instead of EPT Barcelona. I was like in Barcelona. Like once I'm over it, I'm gone. Or like if I do that with poker for sure.
What is this? Expand upon it a little bit more. Then what is it about the environment or the people? What does that stir within you? And the reason I ask that is every time from the moment I met you, every interaction with you has been easy. It's been natural. It's been smooth. Whenever I think to myself, I need a poker player to give me a really good structured opinion about something, I know you're going to respond, right? So you've obviously got the capability within you to mix and socialize with people. So what's really going on there?
It's funny because I just had a conversation with my wife about this. She grew up an only child, and so she always got attention from her parents. And so like for her, she's like, oh, like this quarantine's kind of rough on me. Like I want to go out and I want to see friends and I want to talk and I want to socialize. And I grew up with an older brother and an older sister. And my older brother was like the center of attention. And because I grew up in essentially a 1-bedroom with my mom and my 2 siblings and my uncle who lived with us, because I grew up with 4 other people in a house in a 1-bedroom apartment, that I really value my alone time. And honestly, I'm not very, like, if I'm really interested in something, I'm like, if I was like, oh, I'm really interested in like X, Y, and Z, and this person knows stuff about X, Y, and Z, I will be all in on hanging out with them. But if I'm not interested in what they're saying and I find people to be very like incompetent, I just don't want to be around it. And I think as I've gotten older, I've realized that like when people say stuff like, oh, why aren't you coming out? Like, what else do you have to do? Like people love saying like, oh, it's not like you have anything better to do. But like in reality, to me, sitting on the couch by myself is better than me being in forced social scenarios. I don't know if that completely answers our relationship or our dynamic, but most people I just can't tolerate, and I like you. So I guess that's probably.
I think what you're talking about there is the unwillingness to wear a mask. So when you come
as I got older,
so when you come up against people wearing masks, you just don't have time for them. And when you come up with people who don't have a mask, you feel that energy, and you're like, oh, okay. I might not agree with what this person's saying, but at least this person is talking honestly and openly, and not trying to play the status game, I guess.
I think that's a good way to describe it. I think people think that my biggest pet peeve is people that think they're smarter than they really are, and go full on with their opinions on things that are incorrect, because what the polite societal thing is, like, you let them go on with their ridiculous opinion. Like, I have friends that like will give me like advice like that a doctor should be giving me, as if they know what they're fucking talking about. And like the polite thing is to like let them go on with it, not be confrontational, and then behind their back be like, that guy's a fucking idiot. Unfortunately for me, I just tell them they're wrong or they're an idiot to their face, and that doesn't go over very well. So like, it's just people that are just too incompetent at their job, and then people that think they're way smarter than they are two things that I find in society that just bother me so much, that like I just have kind of like weird breaking points. Like if I'm like, oh, my internet's slow, I gotta call like the internet company, and then the person who works there just can't quickly process the issue or connect me to someone that can process the issue. I'm not very good on like the phone with them, which is probably a rude thing to say because it sucks. Like they're trying their best, but because they're incompetent, it bothers me, which is probably why in social scenarios, I feel like people that are like wasting time or incompetent, or people that like are so strong about their opinion, even though it's incorrect. It's too much. But there's people that are just experts in their field, right? And I love spending time with those people. Or like if someone's like, hey, can I pick your brain about poker? And I'm like, sure. And I'll be like, hey, here's what I would do, this, and this. But then if the person's not good and then comes up with like responses being like, oh no, I actually think you're wrong about this. If you were really good at it, I'd be like, okay, let's talk about it. But there's too many people that aren't good at it, that have their own opinions on it, that are stronger than someone who's been doing it forever. Those are the social scenarios that I just can't, like, it's just too much.
Yeah. When I do the I Am High Stakes poker interviews, and sometimes when I read the comments on YouTube, which is very rare because it impacts my self-esteem, you'll get the odd constructive comment, which will be like, why don't you ask them more things about poker? And the reason that I don't do that is because I feel a little bit out of my depth talking to somebody about poker when I know nothing about poker. But hey, I know about life because I've lived life. So I feel much more confident talking about life than I do about poker. So I just don't go there
Yeah.
because, just like you say, I think that I would feel like if the other person told me about poker and then I react in my non-poker way, it's gonna put them off, and then you lose that kind of like that connection.
Yeah, most people don't have that awareness that you do.
Yeah. So this is why I'm not going to ask you much about poker. So no, I was trying to go with a tack about life and then back in with poker.
Yeah, but to your point, I grew up in a full household, so
yeah,
I love being by myself. Which is funny because my mom is the same way. Like, my mom is like thriving in quarantine, right? Like every time I talk to her, she's just like, "Oh yeah, I just stopped watching TV. Like I'm just like watching like YouTube documentaries and like trying new cooking recipes, and I'll go out and I'll walk like a mile a day and like stuff that she probably didn't normally do." And like outside of her like church every day, she kind of didn't do much, and so now she's like there's too much TV and I'm done with it. Where like I'm kind of the same way where I'm just like I'm enjoying it in a sense because I'm used to being locked down in my house. Whereas my brother is probably driving him nuts because like my brother is like at everyone's wedding and like the middle of the dance floor and like loving life, and he's probably just up a wall somewhere.
It's going to be very strange getting back to people. We went for a walk last night, and I said to my wife Liza, I imagine how many couples are walking around the streets of LA here that never walked with each other before. Like husbands and wives that just never ever spend any time with each other, are suddenly holding their hands walking around the street.
Yeah, I know it's definitely a thing.
Yeah. So I grew up in a council house when I was younger in the northwest of England, and we had a 2-bedroom house. So I didn't have to share with my mom and dad, but I did have to share with my sisters. And it is
how many sisters?
3, but I think I think it was 2. I shared with 2.
Okay.
So I found that really, really difficult. Talk about that a little bit more. Like that. What was it? So I assume you wasn't very well off when you were younger. Where did you grow up, and what was the circumstances like?
I grew up in Chicago. I grew up in the city, which is funny because when people are like, "Oh, like," so I have a really good immune system, knock on wood, but like I don't get sick. And then everyone's always like, "You never get sick," and I'm like, "Yeah, because I grew up just like in the city. Like I grew up like." I probably picked up shit off the ground and ate it. Like my mom worked 2 jobs, and I had an older brother and older sister who were like 7 to 10 years older than me. So like they were basically just babysitting me. But I was kind of on my own, like walking to school by myself. Like I was home alone a lot. But like at the same time, I still lived in this like big crowded household, and in like an immigrant household, like there's like Indian TV on in the background. There's like along with like 90s Bulls games, along like my mom loved sports. So there was like all that stuff. And like, I like played baseball like all the time with my friends, but like we played in like a parking lot because there's not baseball fields where you grew up. So like, I didn't grow up very well off, which is not funny because that neighborhood of Chicago is gentrified. So when I see it now, I'm just like, wow, you know what? Like that apartment that was $400 a month that we rented is now like a $350,000 like 2-bedroom condo because the area got gentrified. But like my school had like metal detectors. It was probably one of the worst Chicago public schools in the city. So like it was like the weird way to grow up because I didn't even like I went to a Jewish high school in the suburbs of Chicago because my parents moved or my mom moved, and like I didn't even know what a Jewish person was till I went to high school. I had no idea what it was. I just thought it was Christmas and like Eid. We didn't really celebrate Ramadan. Like I didn't fast when I was a kid. My mom's religious, but she's Shia Muslim, and she's actually like on the crazy liberal spectrum of like Islam, right? Like she was like, "Oh, you can't fast. You're just gonna get sick. You have to drink water. It's hot outside." So like I kept hitting culture shocks that I didn't hit. Like there's only one white kid in my elementary school. I went to the same school from kindergarten to 8th grade. like I was just way smarter than everyone. And then when I went to high school, I was like the dumbest kid. And it took me like a whole year to catch up because the stuff I was learning in a bad Chicago public school was nothing. And like the stuff that these kids were learning in like upper class Jewish neighborhoods in the suburbs, like I had no idea what like a ACT tutor was, like none of that stuff. It was kind of just like, just figure it out on my own. So probably even in high school, I was probably locked in my room trying to catch up on school. Which is probably another reason for the quarantine. But yeah, like I grew up in a not well-off Chicago neighborhood. And then I was fortunate. My mom basically took a second job. We moved to the suburbs. And then that's probably why I got into poker, is because I went from my mom making like $6 an hour to me being able to make like $75,000 my like first weekend playing full-time poker, and being like, what the fuck? Like, where does all this money come from? And then using it to like pay, like to buy her house and to buy her car and like to pay for stuff that like she wouldn't have been able to pay for herself, I guess.
You mentioned that about your family, but you didn't mention your father. Do you mind talking about that a little bit?
My parents got separated when I was 10, 11. My father was never really that much around. So I didn't really have much of a relationship with him. And I hadn't really seen him since I was 10 years old.
That I actually got divorced when my son was 10 as well. And I always worry that at some point in the future, that decision will affect him in any way. Do you think it affected you in any way, positively or negatively?
You know what? I was so young and my father wasn't really around when I was even under 10 that personally for me, it didn't affect me. I'm sure in some way, if I went to a therapist or something, they would find a way, but it didn't affect me because I didn't really I didn't know what I would be missing because I never had it to miss. My uncle basically lived with us since I was a kid. So like he was always available. And then my brother was 8 years older. So like, it was kind of like patchwork. Plus my mom liked sports. My mom was super like,
your mom was a super mom.
Yeah. She was working 2 jobs and making it home in time to watch like basketball and football games with me. So
why, you said like you went from being like one of the smartest kids in class to being one of the dumbest kids in class when you switched because of the standards of your school. And you talked about, holding up in your room and getting good at it. What was your drive around then? Because I know certainly when I was a kid, I hated school. I never, ever, ever entered my head to try to do good. I just wanted to get out of there. So what was it about you that attracted you to it?
So I coasted through kindergarten through 8th grade. Like I don't think I ever studied for a test. I missed the maximum allowable days of school you could miss, which in Chicago public school, I think you can miss 33 days of school. And my mom would wake up for work and be like, all right, here's your lunch, go to school. And I would just go back to bed and pretend and then I would write a note with her name and sign it. And then I had like friends that were really smart that I grew up with that I also went to church with. And we would just like, their parents would be at work. So we would just like play video games at their house. And I like kind of got away with whatever I wanted because my grades were so good. And then when I got to high school, I took like all these entrance exams and I was in these like basic class. Like they were like, oh, can I take regular biology? And they're like, no, you need to take lab science, and then you'll take biology your sophomore year. And then I was like, wait, so I'm just going to be a year behind because I grew up in the Chicago public school system, which is just poorly run. And so, I don't know. I just was like, that's not how I'm conditioned. So like, I told my mom and my mom's like, no, you have to take honors classes because like to her, it's like I came to America to get this kid like a better education. And so, because my siblings were older when they came, it was going to be way tougher for them to adjust because now my brother's like 10 years old when he comes and he's got a long way to catch up to like get into a good high school. And then it's not like I can go to my mom and be like, hey mom, I need help with math because she has a high school education from Pakistan, right? So she doesn't know any of this stuff either. So like to her, it was like, just figure it out on your own. And so I had her go to my guidance counselor freshman year and say, like, I want to put him in all the regular honors classes. And the guidance counselor's like, he's not going to be able to do it. And she basically was like, put him in for the semester. If he fails, he'll take summer school or something and he'll be fine. And like, I was like, all right. So I kind of had no choice. Like, I was either just going to fail this class or I was going to teach myself everything. And I was always really good at just, without a teacher, picking up a book and just learning it, which I feel like now would have been even easier with like YouTube. But like, I was just really good at like, okay, here's the book, here's what I need to learn, and just memorizing everything. And so by the end of my first year, I had taken all the normal classes a normal freshman would have taken, and I'd gotten an A in all of them. And I like was taking all the regular AP classes. So like, it was probably just more, it was probably competitive in a sense, but it was also just like, I'm not trying to get held back because that sucks. And like, it was a lot of like, I'm kind of the reason like my mom came to America and dealt with all this. So like, I can't really let her down in a way because she's working 2 jobs and I'm not trying to take like remedial classes in high school, especially because she's moving to like an expensive suburb and paying rent so that I can go to school here. So like, it was kind of like, I can't really let her down, but at the same time, I was kind of fortunate because there was no checks and balances on me. Like she didn't go to like parent teacher conferences or any of that stuff. She was just too busy. So like, all I could do is just show her my progress reports and my report cards. And like, if I got a B, she would be pissed. And if I didn't, she'd be happy. So like, I don't think I got maybe 1 B plus from high school and college. It's just like one of those things where I was just like, there's probably a competitive thing where I was like, I just have to be better than people at this because like, I kind of have no choice. And then like, as I got older, it's funny because like all these kids would be like, oh yeah, well, like, did you take like test prep classes? And I was like, nope. I don't even know what the fuck that was. Like, I was my own test prep class. Like, it's probably one of those. It's probably similar to poker. It was just competitive, and I just didn't realize it at the time. But for me, it was also culturally like all my friends that I had from church. Their parents moved to America in the late 70s, early 80s, and their parents were on their ass about getting good grades. So like when I hung out with them, they were forced to study as well. So I kind of didn't have. Everyone around me kind of had the same scenario. So I was kind of just locked in the same way they were.
Kind of like, we talked about this with Daniel Negreanu yesterday. I interviewed him on his hero's journey. We were talking about toxic people and toxic environments. And we were saying like, if you're going to be in a toxic environment with toxic people, you're going to do toxic stuff with those people.
Exactly.
If you're going to be in a good church environment where working hard and being intellectually, being highly intellectual and being competitive in that area. I see actually in LA here that I'm in a Korean family here, and the Korean family structure is all very religious, very Christianity, and very really work hard at school, do music and stuff. Whereas my British side of me is just like leave school as soon as you can and get a job so you can earn money to go to the pub. That's it. It's completely different lifestyles.
It's funny that the like stereotype of the immigrant family that like the parents are too hard on their kids. I kind of like it. Like I see the balance. Like my wife is white and she's Jewish, so she has like kind of some of it, but she's like, oh, like I still want like our kids to be like fun and popular and stuff. And I was like, I'd rather have a nerdy science kid than like a fun and popular kid because like that nerdy science kid will be set for a while. Like, and I'll probably be similar to my mom where like, it's probably too far off, but it worked out. Like it worked out for me because I was still like somewhat social. Because once I catch up to the work in high school, I'm coasting back through just like I did elementary school. It was just the first year that really was tough. But after that, it was like, for me, it was fortunate. Like I could coast through and still get A's. But like catching up was like the toughest part about it. That 1 year where it was just like, what the fuck? Like I have to teach myself. Like I basically have to make up a year or 2 years of middle school that I never had by myself. I don't know. I just never saw like it was insane to me that like the math that these kids were learning in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade in like a Jewish suburb. Like I had no idea what any of it was. And yet somehow I was the smartest kid in my elementary school. Like it just doesn't add up because it's 20 minutes away from the city.
Mm.
and these kids have like access to like much better education. But I guess that's just any big city school system. Like even in LA, like some of like Fairfax High School probably doesn't have the same education system as like some of the private schools that like LeBron James will send his kids to, right? Like those kids go in there and the worst school they go to is probably UCLA. Whereas like in other public high schools, the best school they get into is UCLA. Like the standards are just so different. But that comes from having like money and privilege, and which makes sense. I mean,
it sounds like because you grew up in a household of so many people and everybody was so busy, you just learned to look after yourself. So when you went through your educational process, it was the same thing. You were never going to go to people and say, I really need. I remember me asking my uncle lived with me for a bit. I'm like, help me with me maths. I don't know what to do with me maths. Like it just sounds. I never would have thought of trying to figure it out myself. I would have just hit a dead end and been like, I'm done with that.
It's funny because now I would have just gone on YouTube.
Yeah, like, yes, the world's changed so much.
Yeah, like my wife's sister, she's like 11. A couple years ago, she's like 11 or 12. Now she's like 13. But her mom was like, "Oh, you're really good at math. Will you teach her like these different types of algebra things?" And she's like, "Oh, they do like Japanese multiplication." And I was like, "I don't know what that is." And she's like, "Well, how do you do like 62 times 10?" I'm like, "It's 620. I just do it in my head because I'm like, I'll do 60 times 10 and 2 times 10. I'll just add it like really quickly." And then she was like, "Oh no, we do it this way." And there was like lines and all this shit. And I was like, "What?" So I just went on a YouTube dive trying to learn how to do math like in different ways. And back then I didn't have access to that, right? Like I could just watch a 5-minute YouTube video. Like if you buy like an office desk, I'm never reading the packet that comes with it. I just go on YouTube because someone is building that desk on YouTube.
Yeah. Whenever
I can get it done so much faster.
Whenever your phone breaks or you need to, I mean, just this morning, like my 3-year-old daughter and me were having breakfast, and what we do is we create stories. So we ask Google for 5 random words, and we have to put the words in the story. We ask Google for a random animal, and then when she's learning the word, she's like, "What does revoke mean?" So this morning was revoke. What does revoke mean? And she's like 3, right? So I'm like, well, ask Google. She's like, Google, what does revoke mean? And she's, she's so cool. Like she'd be like, why does a rhino have a horn? She'll ask like some amazing questions. So I think if you balance it, with your kids, it's a good thing. You just gotta balance it.
When you're a kid, you'd have to go to a dictionary and look it up.
Yeah. Oh no, you have to go to the library and then get a dictionary and look it up. Yeah.
Like technology is great now, but it also it sucks because like there's so much fucking distractions.
Yeah,
like you've got. I didn't have a laptop in school, but now I'm like, man, it'd be way better a laptop instead of writing chicken scratch on my notepad and trying to read it later. But now I'm just like, if I had my laptop, I might just be playing poker in the background and never get anything done. Like it's nice and not nice,
Yeah. You got to balance it, definitely. So when I was a kid growing up in South Wales in the UK, I'm half Chinese, right? So I was the only Asian kid in school. Everybody was white, and I used to get called a chink, a gook, all kinds of Jap, and I was always getting into scrapes and fights and scratches, Now, when I came to America and my wife's Korean, and I'll talk to her about it, she's amazed. She's like, I can't believe that. And I'm like, hasn't anyone ever called you any names? And she literally will recite one time in her life in LA where somebody called her a racial name, right? Like,
depends on where you grew up, right?
Like, yeah. Do you have any issues growing up? Because you said you come from Pakistan, right?
Yeah. So my mom was born in India and she grew up in Pakistan. And they came here when I was a baby. You know what? I didn't have any issues, fortunately, but I know my brother used to like. So like the makeup of our elementary school and then the neighborhood high school that he went to was probably like 60% African American, probably like 30% Mexican or Latin, and then a couple white people and a couple Indian people. And I had friends that went to that local high school that I went to elementary school, and they told me they would get their ass kicked all the time because they were Indian. I got pretty lucky that I didn't really face it. I mean, the only times I feel like I witnessed racism is so Chicago's about 30% African American, and then like 45% Caucasian, and then Asian and other minorities. So I always lived in liberal cities. I lived in Chicago, I lived in LA, I lived in Toronto. So like for me, like I just lived in those types of cities where I didn't feel it. If you went to a bar in Chicago, sometimes I'd go to a bar and they'd be like, oh, you need to have black dress shoes to get in. And I'd be like, those white people are wearing sneakers. Like they're wearing like not even like nice sneakers. They're just wearing like dirty run of the mill white sneakers that they've like ran around in the mud in. And he's like, oh yeah, that's because they know somebody. And I was like, it's because I'm not white. Like, come on, give me a break. But like, I was always like, I would just call people out on it. And then my roommate would be like, we're never getting in if you just call the guy racist. I was like, well, like at the same time, do I want to go in here?
Yeah.
Like, not really. But after I started living in a neighborhood for a while, I just knew everyone, so I didn't have to worry about waiting in lines. But like in those instances, you feel it, like just like small amounts of racism. But I like, or like when someone would do like the apu, like, thank you very much, like as a joke. But like, I never really found that like that offensive. I didn't really find that Trudeau brown face thing that offensive either. Like, I get why people would find it offensive. Do you know the whole Trudeau thing?
No.
He goes to a Halloween party like dressed as Aladdin and does like a brown face, and it's like a whole thing. And I was like, I talked to a lot of my friends that are like Indian or Pakistani, and they just thought it was funny. But like the people that were most offended were white people, and I was like, people like brown face, like blackface is offensive, like, but like I just, it's weird. Brown people are just like, why would he do that? It just looks stupid, like kind of, because it's such a random one-off, and it's not like it hasn't culturally been happening forever. But like, I didn't really face it, but I'm sure my siblings did because like it was before my time, maybe. But because I always lived in liberal cities, but at the same time, if I live in Oklahoma, it wouldn't shock me if like people were racist to me all the time. Like it's just a part of the country you're in, right? Like I try to make it a point not to go to states where like Trump was elected, because like that's just not, I'm not trying to be in those scenarios. Like I find like the hats and all that stuff highly uncomfortable. Like even when I went to Hard Rock, I went out that night that was like the inauguration or whatever, and there's so many people in these stupid hats, and I was like, part of me, like, I don't think anything will happen, but at the same time, it wouldn't shock me. And I don't want to be put in that situation. So maybe I just wasn't like, there were small bits of racism probably, but I never had like people just like be like, oh, hey, Hindu, what are you doing? Like that. None of that stuff happened to me.
It's that time of the show where we break your concentration and remind you that if it wasn't for our sponsor, Run It Once Poker, you'd never learn how to win a Triple Crown. So it's time to give them a shout out. Rio Poker is an online poker room for players, created by players. And if that appeals to you, then head over to once.run/hero play today and pick up a 100% welcome bonus up to a ceiling of €600. And there are two elements of this deposit bonus that excite me. First, it never expires as long as you play one hand every 30 days. And second, all of your deposits count during your first 30 days of this bonus period. So remember that URL, it is once.run/hero play. Yeah, if somebody come up to me today and said, or I was playing poker with someone and someone said, shut the fuck up, you fucking chink, if we got into an argument or debate or something, I think I'd be shocked, like, if it happened today.
Yeah.
Just because I'm older and I actually associate the racism and xenophobia that I suffered as just plain child ignorance that came from just their upbringing and the societal structure. It was not like Adolf Hitler racism, if you can differentiate such a thing. Have you ever found any of it in poker at all? Because obviously it's a great place for so many different cultures and different people.
Outside of random people asking me if I'm Vivek, just randomly coming up to me and asking me, or being like, "Oh, are you Faraz?" And I'm like, "No." But like outside of just random people that'll just ask you that, and I'm like, "What if I said yes? What's the next part of this conversation?" Like, no, not really. Like, like it's like it wouldn't stun me, but not really. You get like people will stereotype, like people will be like, "Oh man, you must be really good at math," and I'm just like, "I am," but like, there's no reason for this. But like, no, it's still like, again, it wouldn't stun me in certain venues. Like if I went to WPT Choctaw, it wouldn't stun me if someone was just like go back to your country. But
yeah,
like,
if you grew up where I lived,
yeah,
you would I would be the guy who owned the Chinese takeaway. Like you're from China, and you would be the person who owns the corner shop.
yeah.
Like people in the UK. There was a time, I don't know if it's the same now, but there was a time where the people in the UK, British people, were terrible with people about packy. Anyone brown was a packy. And in Manchester, before I was 10, so this is when I'm really young and I can't remember it too much, like when there was people who were coloured, that kind of abuse went on quite liberally with
now the mayor's a Pakistani.
Yeah, in London. Yeah.
London, yeah.
So
London's just so Indian.
London is just it's just such a cosmopolitan city that you shouldn't really have much of a problem there, but you certainly do. So you're growing up as a kid. When does poker pop up into the equation there?
So I went to school at Illinois. I had taken so many AP classes that it only took me about 2.5 years to finish all my credits. I didn't know what I wanted to do, so I started studying for medical school, which is typical.
So stereotypical, Mo.
Yeah. I mean, talk about stereotypical. I went in for engineering, which is also stereotypical. Hated it. Then switched to business. Then I was like, I'll just go to law school. I kind of just didn't know what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
Then I got offered a finance job and I was just like, nah. So I just stayed on campus and just deferred graduation. I just started taking like classes I didn't need to graduate. Like I started taking physics and chemistry, and I was just like, whatever, we'll see what happens. And a friend of mine took me to a poker game in a dorm. It's funny, I lived in that dorm freshman year, but like took me probably like first semester senior year, took me to a poker game. Actually, the first person I met was Ravi, who I hadn't known at the time. I actually saw Faraz at a frat party once, and I knew he played poker and had poker games at his house, but I wasn't really into poker at the time. And he was just playing like party poker on his laptop while playing this 25-cent, 50-cent game. And he was like, oh, I want a seat to this Sunday Million. And I was like, what the fuck? Like, it's just random jargon, right? Like if I said that stuff to like my cousin who doesn't play poker, he'd be like, I don't know what you're talking about. And I was just playing 25 cents to 50 cents. And at this time, I don't have any money. It's like I'm going to a state school. I have like no money. My mom still works 2 jobs. And so I was like, So like, I might have taken like $25 or $50 out of the ATM. And I just played this game a little bit. I hadn't seen the World Series of Poker except for like in the background on TVs if I was like at someone's place. So this is 2006, maybe. So I kind of had no idea. I had a couple friends that would talk about going to Vegas to play poker, but I just kind of like brushed it off. And then I just kind of got really into it. I didn't really have anything to do in college. I had taken all these classes. I had a job lined up for when I graduated. So I was like, all right, whatever, I'll play poker. Like, and I'll just like party and stuff. And this will be like my last year where I just chill. And then once I get a job, I'll have to like work my ass off. Cause I'd done like internships at JP Morgan, and they were like 80 hours a week. And I already knew I was going to hate it. So I was like, I'll do that for a year and then I'll go to law school or I'll go to business school or something. Cause I just like being in a school environment. Because I always got A's, I was like, okay, I thrive in like educational environments. So like, I'll just stay in school until like someone just gives me a bunch of money. Like, but ideally I would be like in my 40s teaching at like MIT and like walking around campus and getting a couple $100,000 and just like studying or doing some sort of research grant. That's how I always thought like my life would kind of go. And then I got into online poker and I was just winning tournaments online. And I had no idea what was going on. And that's kind of just how I got into it. I eventually moved to Chicago. I got a place in the city with um, a friend of a friend. We had no money. He had maybe 2 months of rent. We had no furniture. We had like 2 lawn chairs and like a 13-inch TV. And I was like, I'm just gonna play some poker. Let's see if we can make some money. And like, legitimately, the first day I played, I won like a tournament for like $10,000, like a $5 tournament. And then the next day was a Sunday, and I played an F tops, and I cashed for like $73,000.
Wow.
And like by the end of the weekend, I was like, hey, we can afford beds and couches and TVs and stuff. And I had turned like a couple $100 into like $100,000 on Full Tilt, and I was like, oh, that's kind of nuts. Kept my job, started law school, but I was just making so much money playing poker, and I knew I wasn't good. I just knew I was like smarter than the people I was playing against. And at the time, I didn't know what variance was, and I assumed you just win every time you're all in. So I just started reaching out to people that were really good, like at the time, and I was like, "Hey guys, want to like talk over the mistakes we're making?" And they were like, "Sure." And it was just organically like Skype chats and like finding peers that I wasn't even sure if they were good. They just had good results, and the ones that I felt like could have good conversation with and make good points with, I kept in touch with. And the ones that were just like, oh, I'm just smoking weed and clicking buttons, I just didn't stay in touch with. And fortunately for me, like I just kept getting better. And that whole first year, I was probably, if I did an all in equity chart, it would probably be through the roof as how good as I was running. And then
let me stop you there a minute then. I remember when I first started playing on party poker, I had never played poker before, and I just by accident, I don't know, I must have had a good hand or something, and I opened up under the gun and everyone folded, and then I had another decent hand and I did the same, and then I started to find a pattern. This is before I'd read anything about poker. Every time I opened in early position, everyone would fold. So I just started opening all this trash, really, really high, bets from early position. What was the dumb thing that you did when you first started out that you look back on now?
Poker play wise, I would just love to squeeze shove like 7-8 suited in all these hands, because like now I'm like, oh, I'm in the big blind. Like I get to go 6 ways and try to flop like a good hand. Before I'd be like, I don't care how many big blinds I have. Look at all that dead money in the pot. Let's just put it all in. And that's probably just like running up against ace king and just winning every time. But honestly, for me, I had it was such a gambling high at some point where like, I was like, all right, I'm going to turn this 300 into like 100K playing cash games. And I would just do it. And it didn't occur to me like, holy shit, I have $100,000. It was like, all right, let's go next stake. Cause I was actually like, I felt so confident that I was destroying these people. And because I wasn't taking the bad beats in the beginning, to me, it was like, oh yeah, like I got it in with a set and that guy has a fucking straight. Like the board's just going to pair, like kind of. But, like then when I took the really bad beats for like 200K pots, I was like, oh, fuck me. Like I have to start all over again. And like after it happened like twice, I was like, okay, I'm not going to play the low stakes. I'm just going to try to win in the high stakes. Like I also just have a weird track. I just didn't play low stakes tournaments. I just didn't know how to, like, I'm still terrible at playing like a 1500 at the World Series because I just have no patience for it.
Right.
Like I'm literally going there and I'm like, there's no way my ROI is 100% because like, I just have no interest in being here. And until to this day still, like, it's very rare that I'm like, oh, here we go, $1,500 at the World Series. Like it's just like I won one and I still thought, I was like, how the fuck did I win this thing?
whereas I'm like, fucking hell, I get to play in a 1,500 World Series. Yeah. Like, where's my bucket list? Like, I'm so fucking excited. I'm sweating and smelling. I haven't even fucking played a hand,
Last summer, I just skipped most of them. Like, I got there during the World Series without looking at the schedule because I was just like, yeah, whatever. Like, the schedule is the schedule. Like, I'll wake up and there's a tournament to play. And then I would wake up and I'd be like, oh, it's just a 1K. And I just go back to sleep. But like Vegas, it's so hot that like, it's really easy to sleep a lot.
Yeah.
But,
so as you're just starting out, and you're starting to hit, I mean, I've been lucky enough to win a 10 grand tournament for, I think it was a $10 rebuy on PokerStars with an additional add-on. and I never rebought, and I added the add-on, so it cost me $20, and I won 10 grand, and I finished like something ridiculous, like 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
And I came upstairs, and my dad was there getting ready to go to work, and I was just fucking shaking. I was so excited. I wanted to tell the world, and there's just my dad, and I told my dad, and he was like, "Yo, what?" Smoking, yo, what? Like couldn't really get it in his head, and then he went to work, and I was on my own. Like when you won like 70 odd grand, given that your mum's working 2 jobs, like try to give me that juxtaposition. Like what's going through your head? Like, are you in kind of like I need to save my family mode? Like, or it sounds like you're just in video game rack up.
I was in video game mode. It was kind of like, it's kind of like, I'm just collecting coins like Mario, and my balance is going up. That the actual funniest story is we had a 13-inch like heavy like box TV, and we'd moved in September, so it was the start of football season. And I had an air mattress. My roommate had an air mattress. We had no couch. We had 2 like lawn chairs that his mom gave us, which is very Indian. And we had like a shitty desk and like a bunch of books to prop up our laptops, and like shitty office chairs, like really shitty office chairs. And so it was Friday night, we were just at home, and we kind of like I was like, I'm just going to fire up like the $5 rebuy on PokerStars. And my roommate's like, okay, I'll deposit $25 and fire. At that time I had like $200-$300 in my online poker account. So I was like, I'll just fire this up, and like, I'll play like $50 or $100 with the tournaments, and like see if we can make some money and buy like a fucking couch. And like 8 hours later, like I actually ended up winning the $5 rebuy on PokerStars and a smaller $3 rebuy with not as many people. And I was like, I just made like 10 grand or something, right? Like I made a good chunk of money. So it's like, tomorrow Saturday, let's go and get a TV, because like we need a fucking TV. So we go to Best Buy and we buy like this 32-inch TV, and the brand was Insignia, and it was like, I don't know, $400 or something. And so I was like, all right, we got a TV, we need a couch. And so Saturday we're kind of like out drinking, partying, and then Sunday I'm like, I'm gonna play online. And like at the time I was drinking soda, which I probably haven't had a can of Coke in like 15 years. I have like 7 or 8 empty cans of soda next to my computer desk. I have like candy. I have all the shit that like I would never have now. And I'm in my room, and my roommate, I haven't seen my roommate all day. He's probably just watching TV on this new shitty TV we've gotten. And he comes in the room. He's like, how are you doing? I was like, well, I put most of the $10,000 in play. And he's like, what the fuck? And I was like, but don't worry. There's a $300 F-Tops tournament, and we're down to 5. And he's like, what do you mean you're down to 5? And I was like, I don't know. First place is like $230,000, and there's 5 people left. And I was like, I also just won this $100 tournament. Like, so we're fine. And he's like, okay, what's 5th place pay? And I was like, I don't know. Like, first place is $230,000. Like, what does it matter what 5th place pays, right? Like, I don't know ICM at the point, right? Like, I'm just like dicking around. And like, I remember I just shoved king, queen, and ace king. Like, I remember how I busted in 4th. And I remember like a month later, once I started learning about poker, I was like, what the fuck? I was probably 2nd in chips. Like, what did I do? And then like, all of a sudden I had like 100K in my account because I cashed for like 70 some thousand. And I remember being like, all right, we got to return the shitty TV and get a real TV. So we went to Best Buy the next day, and we bought a 32-inch Samsung TV. And I was like, now we got a real TV. Let's go get a couch. And so we went and got a couch. And then I was like, I need a bed. So we got a bed. And I was like, I need real computer monitors. I'm like, I probably spent like $2,000 like outfitting our apartment. And I was like so stoked about it. It didn't occur to me that like, hey, I should just give my mom a bunch of money. It did after like, I think within 6 months, I had probably made like 250 to 300K. And I was like,
how old are you then?
22.
22, yeah.
But like before that, I'd gone to Vegas and I'd spun up like 2,000 to 100,000 playing cash.
Wow.
And I was just crushing this like 5,100 game. And I just lost all of it in like 1 or 2 hands. And then I just came home and like, was like, what the fuck? I could have really used that money. Like I remember borrowing.
How did that feel?
I was like fucking, but I think I was just all in like, I was in like a gambling high at like the age of like 21, right? Like I was playing against people that were like famous back then, like Brad Booth and like Mimi Tran and like Kenny Tran. And I was like destroying these guys. And I was just like, I'm just way better than these people. Like, because like, personally, it was probably the cocky 21-year-old. I was like, I'm just way smarter than these people. Like, I'm not going to make wrong decisions. They're kind of gambling and I'm just kind of making the right actual math decision, even if I didn't know the actual perfect math to it. But like, once I lost it, I was just like, well, fuck me. And then I like used my mom's like debit card or credit card, booked a flight back home. And I was just like, shit. But even at that age, it didn't occur to me. Like, I wasn't depressed. I wasn't like, I was just like, all right, no more poker. And then like later on, I was back to playing poker. But I was like, even now when I bust tournaments, I don't really get that depressed or that annoyed. And if I do, it doesn't linger. But yeah, after like I was 22 and I had made like 250, but even then I wasn't like, I'm going to play poker full time. It was like, okay, law school costs $50,000 a year. I'm not going to work because the amount of money I made in this short time is way more than I'll make in 3 years of working in a financial firm. But I have enough money for law school. And I knew at the time my mom's house still had like 150K on it or whatever. So I paid off like 50,000 of it. And then I was just winning. Like I won like a scoop and I just paid off 50,000 of it. And then after I won like Monte Carlo, I like paid off whatever was left on it. And I bought her a new car. And like, I basically told her like, hey, here's like a bunch of money for whatever expenses you have. And if you want to retire. And she was like, I kind of like working still. So I'm going to work part-time because it keeps me active. But like, it was kind of nice for her to be like, hey,
hang on a minute. I can't let this one go. This is like the fundamental, this is like one of the major plot scenes in your hero's journey. I can imagine you, like, how did that feel for you to be able, like my boy right now, he's 19, lives with his mum. Yeah. He's just got a job in Deloitte as an apprenticeship. He rang me up yesterday, so excited. £1,000 dropped into his bank account. He's never had £1,000 in his life, right?
Yeah.
And I said to him, you know, you've probably got to give most of that to your mum, right? Because she can't work because of COVID. And he's like, you could tell he's like, because he's never had that much money before. And you can tell he really wants to spend it on himself or save it or something. To give it away to someone doesn't come like natural to him. I don't think it would have come natural to me either. But you get the opportunity to do this. How did that feel, first of all? And what was the reaction of your mum? Because I guess you've got to tell her where you got it from.
So my mom didn't know I was playing poker. She thought I was still in law school. And she found out because she was at like a family gathering and someone just told her they saw me on ESPN. And I remember the episode, I was just getting bluffed by Michael Mizrahi in an NAPT. Stupidest fold. And then she was like, excuse me. And like for my mom, like my older brother's like her favorite, like a running family theme. Even my wife is like, yeah, you know, you're like not the favorite. And I was like, I might be the least favorite because like culturally my older brother and older sister are similar to her, right? Like they came to America, they're still more Indian and more Pakistani. They like, when they have personal problems, they call my mom, right? Like, whereas like, I'm not going to call my mom if I have like a personal problem because like, what am I going to do? Like, hey mom, like I got too drunk last night. Like she doesn't drink. She knows I drink.
Mom, I went to Vegas and run like,
like when am I going to
250 and lost it.
So disown me. Whereas like my brother has like personal problems that are more like relatable. Like she's like, oh, I can fix these guys, right? Whereas like with me, it's like I left the house when I was 17. I've never lived at home. My brother still lived at home for a long time. My sister still lived at home. At 17, I went to college and I was just like even during the summers, I stayed on campus or like and then as soon as I graduated college, I got my own apartment. And then like I probably have spent since college, I've probably spent less than like 50 to 100 days at my mom's house, right? And like in 17, 18 years. So like for her, it's like, this is the kid I talk to. I talk to her on the phone every day, 5 minutes a day, probably. During sports seasons, probably longer. Sometimes I'll be like, oh, hey mom, like there's a big playoff game and I'll just fucking stay on the phone with her and we'll like kind of watch together through FaceTime or whatever. Me and her, when I lived in the city, she would drive up to the city and we'd go to Bulls games and I get really nice seats and we'd sit like almost courtside and she'd just be like loving it. And so like I had that kind of a relationship with her. So like I knew if I had to tell her, I had to tell my brother to tell her. So I went to my brother and I was like, hey, here's the deal. Like, here are my tax forms. I'm not in school right now, but I'm making a lot of money. And like, she doesn't realize this, but like the house has been slowly being paid off. And like, I want to get her a car, but I know it'd be kind of ridiculous. And so then he went to my mom and he was like, well, he made like 300K last year. Like, you have to let him do this. And like, he'll go back to school whenever he's ready. But like, he already has a college degree and like, he can get a finance job wherever he wants. And honestly, like, I think it's fine. But like, if he starts struggling financially, then he'll go back. And my mom was like, all right, fine. Because like my brother had approved it kind of.
Right.
He was like, whatever, like he approves it because like she just like can't say no to him. So that kind of worked out in my favor. And then like, even when I took her to buy it, like, this is such a ridiculous story. I won Monte Carlo and I was like, what do I do with all this money? So I was like, I'm going to go buy my mom needs a nice car. Like, she's driving like this beater ass car. I don't drive. So like personally like that's another, when you're like, what's it like just giving someone else money? Like, honestly, I'm pretty simple. Like, I could live my whole life in a 2-bedroom high-rise condo in Chicago and never want a big house. I don't drive, so I don't need a nice car. I prefer like, I don't like expensive meals. I think they're kind of a waste of money. Like, I'd rather go to like Chata in Vegas than go to like Mastro's in Vegas, because the joy I get out of like a $12 like Chata meal or like a Lotus meal or like a ramen or Indian food meal is way better than like an expensive steak meal. So I'm pretty like basic in those senses. Like, I've never spent more than like $150 on like a shirt probably in my life. Same thing, like sneakers, I buy like $100 Jordans, and that's like kind of just how I live. So like, I was like, I'm going to get her like a nice Mercedes, right? So I take my mom to the dealership. I'm like, we're getting a new car. And she's like, I don't need a new car. I have a 2003 Altima and it still works. And I was like, Mom, that car first of all, has hail damage. Like, that car is just beat up. And she's like, oh, it's fine. I was like, it snows in Chicago. Those tires, you skid everywhere. Just get a nice car. Take her. She like, the dealership's like, looks at me and they're like, there's no way this kid's like,
he's got no money.
Car, right? Like, I'm just like in sweatpants and a hoodie. Like, fuck do I know? And I'm like 26 at the time or whatever. So I take her to the dealership and she's walking around and she's just visibly not into this. And then I see this really nice like white Mercedes and I'm like, oh man, this car's so nice. And my mom's like, it is really nice. I was like, let's take it for a test drive. Takes it for a test drive. And the dealership in America, at least, or in Chicago, they'll let you take the car home, right? They'll like pre-approve you and stuff, and they'll just let you take the car and you get like 24 hours or 48 hours to like basically drive the car around like you normally do. And if you don't like it, bring it back. But you're pre-approved for the loan. So like, if you like it, they'll process the paperwork overnight and they'll like email you like a receipt, basically. Like, that's just kind of how the Mercedes was there. So she takes the car home. So I'm like, all right. So I'm like, great. I got her to buy this like $60,000 Mercedes. She likes it a lot. She takes it home. I go back to my place in the city. She's in the suburbs. And the next morning she calls me and I was like, where are you going? And she's like, back to the dealership. I don't want the car. And she just went back and just drops off this car because I'm not around to make her keep it. So then the dealership is like, oh, she just dropped off the car. And I was like, fuck. So then like a couple weeks later, I call my uncle and I was like, I got to get her a car. Like, she needs a car. So I'm flying to WPT Montreal. And I tell my uncle, I'm like, I'll meet you at the car dealership in the suburbs. Like, I'll take a cab or I'll have a friend drop me. We'll get her a car. We'll leave it at her house. And then I'll just leave for the airport. And so I go to the dealership with my uncle. I find a Mercedes that was like the same one that she liked, but a year older. So it's like 45,000 and it was like, had like 6,000 miles and it was a pretty good deal. So I just bought it. I left it outside of her driveway. My sister found out about it and put a bow on it. And then I just left for WPT Montreal. So like, my mom gets out of the house. There's just like a car there waiting for her. And like, she's like, what the fuck is this? And I'm like, you can't return it. Like, I bought it. And she's like, what do you mean? And then, being the immigrant, my mom, she was like, well, I got to preserve the new car. So she just kept driving the old car because she didn't want to get miles on the new car. She's like, when she got a new house, she was like, well, I'm not going to put art on the wall because it'll put holes in the wall and the house will be worth less. And I was like, Mom, you have to live in these things. Like, that's just kind of her mentality. So it took her probably like a year and a half to start driving the car. Now she drives all the time. And like, it's been 7 years, right? Like 8 years since I went on the car. So I was like, Mom, you need a new car. like, let's just get you like a Model 3 Tesla. And she's like, nope, not letting you buy me another car. And I was like, like, that's just kind of, personally for me, it was like, because I'm not there for her all the time, I think I probably use money as like a way to like make me feel better about not being there all the time. Whereas like my siblings are just like, my brother lives in LA, but he goes back to Chicago all the time. My mom comes to LA to visit him all the time. Like, they're just so close. My sister lives near her. So like, personally for me, it's like, if I can just make her life easier financially and get her what she needs, like pay her property tax and like get her a new car, do it, like, it gives me, it doesn't make me feel like I'm like a shitty son, probably.
Yeah, I probably did the same thing to my boy when I split up with his mom, and then I'd already packed my job in to try to be a professional poker player, and then you get that freedom.
Yeah.
You know, when you've worked 9 to 5 for 20 years, and then you're just getting up in your knickers to play like on Full Tilt.
Yeah.
You're just like, the thought of going to get another job is, I just can't describe it. I actually experienced it when COVID hit. I thought, fuck, you know, and it's just like something I wasn't prepared to do. So I ended up traveling around the world as a poker writer instead of being a poker player.
Yeah.
And I couldn't give it up. So I think I overcompensated by my boy everything that he wanted, which is not good.
Yeah, it's like, because of freedom, right?
Yeah, it's not good parenting, folks. It has a lot of problems, but yeah, certainly knew
probably
why I was doing
my relationships probably were too. Before I got married, I was like, I could go here, but like, I'm just gonna go to Montreal and play WPT. But like, part of it was probably because I didn't want to do certain things. So I was like, whatever, like, I can pretend like I'm going to Montreal for work, even though I don't really enjoy the travel. Like, I don't really like live poker that much. I actually kind of hate it. Like, I like online poker. Like, I like just not having to interact with people, and I like not having to fly 6 hours to play a $3,500 tournament. Like, that stuff is kind of just stupid for me. But like, yeah, like using money to compensate for probably lack of being there in real life is probably a very realistic thing. And then same thing with your job thing. The last year I've been basically not really playing poker, probably the last 2 years. I was in New York right before Corona got really bad. I was at a couple job interviews to work for financial firms to be a quant trader because I kind of just got tired of poker. And I was like, quant trading is kind of similar, where they just let me sit behind a computer and give me a bunch of money, and like, I just get to stare at some screens and look at the data and make decisions, which felt like the closest comparison. And then once I got a resume and submitted it, I realized how much they actually value the game theory decision making that goes behind being a high stakes poker player. And then I was taking a bunch of interviews right before Corona, and I had a couple job offers, but like, I hadn't decided on anything. And then now, like, the whole world is different.
Yeah. Nobody wants to. My boy was really worried because he just got in as an apprenticeship with Deloitte, and he's like, "Oh, I wonder if they're going to get rid of me." And I said to him, "They'll probably go for the older ones first. You've got a bit of time on your hands.
You got to go for the big salary, yeah."
Yeah. So, but before we'll get to that in a little bit. But before we get to it, so far as you're talking about playing poker, we haven't even got to a poker career yet. We just got, and it sounds like you're having a lot of fun. It sounds like the emotional side of these swings is, we haven't really talked about that too much. When was a moment, you talked about Monte Carlo, obviously, when I explained to you my 10K moment with my dad, when was the moment where you felt poker made you feel the best?
You know what? I didn't really get to enjoy Monte Carlo that much because I had a really bad flu. And as soon as it was over, I was in a hospital getting IVs because I was so sick. So it's kind of weird. I was in, I think I remember winning my first live tournament. I was at EPT Lutzraki, which was just a one-time stop. It was right outside of Athens. It was when the riots were going on.
Yeah, I was there.
And I had a friend named Athanasios Polychronopoulos, who I'm still really good friends with, and he's from Athens. So I was like, I got to go to this because like he's Greek, his family's there. Like I can kind of have a real experience, and then I'd want a seat probably. And we were done with the main event on day 1 or day 2, and everyone was just jumping in this 2K turbo and like drinking. I've never wanted to drink while I play, like ever. It's just not like, because for me, I don't enjoy poker as much as it's work. So like, I'm not trying to get drunk while I'm doing it. I remember I made the final table of the tournament, or I remember with 18 people left, I had all the chips, and like everyone's on the, like all my friends are on the rail drinking, and Athanasios is teaching me like how to speak Greek, basically. The only word I can know is malaka, which in Greek, depending on how you say it, means jerk off or masturbator, or it could be like you can be like, you can, maybe if you're close friends with someone, you can be like, hey asshole, like, can you do me a favor? And they won't get offended. But people in Greece don't know me. They know Athanasios because he's won a bracelet. He's like the Greek.
Well, he didn't just win a bracelet. He always carries it around with him. So you can always
2 of them. Yeah.
Yeah, 2. You can always pull him out of his little man bag.
Always. He could be at a beach in like Mexico, and they'll just be available for him. It's kind of weird because I have no idea where mine is. Like I won one 3 years ago, and I told him, I was like, I don't know where it is. He's like, what do you mean? And I was like, I mean, it's not in my duffel bag, like, or whatever you carry around. But like, he'll come over to my place like during the summer at the World Series, and I'll be like, yeah, you can just park at my place because I live at the Martin, and then we'll walk to Aria. And he's like, okay, what do I do with my bracelets? And I was like, just leave them in my room. And he's like, oh, I don't know about that. And I was like, what? I was like, just put them under the bed or something. He's like, what if someone breaks in? I was like, you think they're going to break in and take your bracelets at the Martin? They have a doorman.
He's so funny.
He's so ridiculous. So like, I'm playing this tournament, and I don't know what malaka means, but I just, every time I say it, people are cracking up. I knock off the whole final table and I win this tournament. And the whole time I'm just calling everyone a malaka. So I'm like, hey man, good game, malaka, to like a random like 60-year-old Greek guy. And they're just like kind of looking at me like, fuck this kid. And like, that was just pure joy, because we get down to like 3 people and they're asking me to chop. And I'm just like, with you 2 malakas, no way. And like the reporter's like, you just keep calling these people assholes. And Athanasios is just cracking up because he knows that I don't know what I'm calling them.
Right.
And I was just like, I'm doing what? And he's like, you're just like insulting these old Greek men by calling them malakas. Like, you're not friends with them. It's not a friendly term if you're a stranger. And I was like, oh, they just think I'm calling them assholes, like offensively. But I remember like, that was like, and I won the tournament. It was like pure joy. I was like, the first time I won a live tournament, I was just having such a fucking good time. Yeah. And like, I was just like, I'm just way better than these like older Greek men that probably don't know what's happening. And like, not a lot of pros went to Lathraki, right? So like, I was actually like weirdly just having like the time of my life. Even the first place was like $20,000 because it was like, I was having fun. I had like inside jokes with friends on the rail and stuff like that. That was actually more fun than kind of winning Monte Carlo, because the problem with Monte Carlo is I felt there was so much pressure on me to win, because like it was something weird, like 8-handed at the final table. I had cash for more than the whole final table combined or something, because it was such an amateur filled final table. And it was like 2.2 million US for first, and like 8th place was like 180,000 US. And like even during the interview, they asked me like how I feel going in, and I was like, oh, it'll be a disaster if I don't win. And they're like, you're 4 of 8. And I was like, yeah, but I'm just better than these people. And I just felt like there was so much pressure on me to like make every decision correctly. And I was also just, every break, I was like so sick that I was like puking because I was just really sick, because I probably had stomach flu. And so that was like not the best experience, because even after I won, I just was like, I didn't make enough money to party in Monaco. It's too fucking expensive. Like all I can do is like eat a banana and some toast and pass out and hope I feel better in the morning. So probably winning that Greek tournament, maybe some online tournaments, but not really.
Mohsin Charania was a natural, but we're not all that lucky. But don't worry, Run It Once has your back. Sign up today to Run It Once's training site, and you will receive 2 new training videos every day and 3 elite videos, including one from the Muhammad Ali of poker himself, Mr. Phil Galfond. And the link you're looking for this one is once.run/hero learn. When did you decide that you was going to be a pro poker player? Was there a particular moment, or was it just a gradual thing?
I think it kind of just decided for me. I think
Right.
it was just like, hey, this is how much money you're making, and the opportunity cost of not doing this is just too high. And it was just a simple calculation of like, you can be in your 20s, you can get a nice apartment in downtown Chicago where cost of living is really low compared to like LA, San Francisco, New York. You can go out and spend like $100, and like to you it's nothing, and to like your friends that are kind of struggling, it's like, oh man, we're having a lot of fun tonight, kind of. And like, you can still, like, I never played every day. I played 3 days a week, and I was still making a lot of money, and I was still like ranked in the top 10 in every ranking, like based on results. It kind of decided for me. It was kind of just like, am I going to pass up all of this money to start over at the bottom somewhere else? In hindsight, I wish I kind of would have, but in the moment, I don't think I had a choice. I think it was just opportunity cost was too high to do something else.
Who have been the important mentors in your life? And when you think about answering that, it doesn't have to be poker related, and you don't have to have met them. So most of my mentors have just been people who've read books that written books that I've read, and it's changed my life completely. Through your life as a teenager to where you are today, can you pick a few of them that have been really important?
Might sound cliche, but probably my mom. Probably through watching her more than like her giving me firm advice. Probably the concept that this woman in her 20s took 3 kids and just came to America. So my dad had already come to America before her, and like kind of was just living here by himself. And my mom was like, well, I can't live in Pakistan, 3 kids. So she, like, to think about that now, to be like, oh yeah, I'm just going to move to like Russia by myself. Like, I think like people that like can do stuff like that now are pretty strong. So for her to do it with 3 kids, no apartment, no job, no education, and to be like, I'm just going to come here and I'll figure it out. Like, I'll babysit and I'll do this and that. Like, knowing that like someone at that early of an age made such a big sacrifice to give me personally a better quality of life, probably more than my siblings, because like they were probably happy at the age of 10. They had their friends and they had their lives, and sure, in the long term it gave them better quality of life. But when you're 10 and you uproot your family and move to another country, I'm sure it fucking sucks for a kid.
Yeah.
Like, it's probably basically like, hey, you know, like, at least this one will be fine. So like, maybe not a mentor, but an inspiration to be like, no matter how hard shit gets, like, it's probably not going to get as hard as having to move 3 kids, including a baby, to like another country, and like working jobs to survive, and like living in shitty apartments with like cockroaches, and like, it's kind of just like, it's just such a strong thing to do that like you'll never fully appreciate. Other mentors, I feel like I had more really intelligent peers that I fed off of more than mentors that I got advice from. Like, peers, like friends that were educationally on the same level as me, or poker players that were really good that I was like bounce ideas off of, felt more of like a thing than an actual mentor that was like, oh hey, here's like peers. Like, when I didn't enjoy traveling for live poker, like Faraz would be like, no, here's what we're going to do. We're going to go here, but we're going to take this short detour to this town, and we're going to check out this town, stuff I would have never done. Because for me, I was like, dude, I'm 25. I'm financially flexible that I can just go back home to Chicago and party and like live my life. Where he's like, no, we got to check out Amsterdam for 3 days. Or like peers, like where like I'm just complaining because I'm running bad, and I'm just telling poker friends that are probably don't want to fucking hear it, but they listen to me and like were kind of there for me, and like in return I was kind of there for them, type of peers. Just when I was deep in a tournament, being able to like go to like Chris Moorman and be like, hey, like, so what do you think about this situation? Or like, oh hey, like even Jason Mercier when he started, like people like that, where I'd just be like, hey, what do you think about this? Right. Whereas like, I think it was more like going to people that I thought were my equal, and getting honest advice from them, and being able to like, for them to value my advice was probably more important to me than having like a mentor where like I could like they made the mistakes and they could tell me how they made them, because in poker it's still real time, that like your peer can make the same mistake last tournament and they can kind of help you through it. If you're gonna like, they could be like, oh, with 11 left I kind of did these things that I wouldn't have done normally. Like it's such a real time thing. So I would say peers more than mentors, and probably like my mom leading by example, in the sense that I'm just like, I can't really afford to fail. That would let her down more than it would let me down. So that's probably more so than a mentor.
I bet she's really proud of you, you know?
Well, one day.
I mean, this, it is so easy for us, isn't it, to just get on with life and not think back and try to put ourselves in their shoes and have that empathy. I
mean, it's insane. The 80s to move to a new country, like with you don't know the language, you have no idea where you're going to work, you have no idea where you're
going to live.
Yeah, I mean, her brother lived here, so we stayed.
But you got your kids, and you know they're the most important thing in the world to you, and you want them to be safe. It's incredible.
Yeah. Just not knowing language is insane.
I just started learning Korean on Duolingo. So
really?
I'm not only because I'm living in a Korean household, and so.
Does your child speak Korean?
My 3-year-old is better. She picks it up a lot better. She was on Duolingo with me, and I have to tell her to get off it because she keeps answering them before I can wrap my head around. I have to like take my time and then write it down. She's just like dun 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 dun. Like,
that's awesome. Yeah.
Get out the way,
I picked up Gujarati and Hindi when I was a kid because my grandma and my mom. I speak Urdu with my mom.
Oh, right, cool. I'm gonna cover this next one in these 3 parts in one big hit because time's moving on a little bit. But I'm interested in whether every movie, every story, the hero has an all is lost moment where you're thinking, oh man, life is just, there's no way they're going to get out of that hole. So I'm interested in whether you had an all is lost moment and what that was, if you did. Kind of like what obstacles have gotten in your way in life and what your main villains have been in life.
I would say outside of just random poker downswings, you kind of just play your way out of it and you just hope that you keep studying and make the right decisions. That seems very trivial. I'd say over the last couple of years, so what I think the issue for me with poker over the last couple of years is I think the buy-ins are either too high or too low, right? Like 8 years ago when I was playing, I could go find a 10K at Borgata. I could find a 10K in Florida. I could find a 10K in Vegas. Now the problem is, look at the World Series schedule. Like, I'm not trying to grind $500 Colossus and like $1,000 tournament, right? And if I want to play 5 and 10Ks, they kind of don't exist. I have to go play the Aria 25K where like there's 20 people. They're all really fucking good. They all have backers to the point where they can re-enter unlimited times. And they figured out a way to play these tournaments for 5, 10, 15% of themselves and treat it like a series of essentially 3 to 5Ks. And then you look at the earnings numbers, and if you'd have to probably divide them by 15 to get real lifetime earnings, right? So like the way poker went, and with the end of online poker, it basically became to me that like I don't think there's that much of a place for me in poker because I played the high stakes tournaments. I didn't do well, and it's probably a mix of I wasn't prepared and a mix of just variance because the sample size will never get big enough. And most of the tournaments I did well in, all the ones that I won were 10K buy-ins essentially. So there was this sweet spot where there was like 300 to 500 people playing $10,000 tournaments, and I thought this is where like I'm winning, probably because in $1,000 tournament the field's too big, and there's going to be too many times where I'm going to get like 19th and just not realize all of my equity in cash for $6,000, and then I'll be like, this was a waste of my time. And probably because to me, flying to Montreal for a $3,500 Canadian tournament, I'm never going to be fully into it. And so the last couple of years, I was like, I need to like find other things to do because you can never make enough money living in a place like California or New York or Chicago, because personally for me, I want to live in a major US city because I don't drive. I thrive on the like 2 a.m. late night Indian food I can get from New York, or like walking to a coffee shop, right? Because I grew up in a city, suburban environments feel suffocating to me. So because I've established that, I need to make a certain standard of money to live the way I do. And you can make like $2-3 million playing poker, right? After your buy-ins, after taxes, that's not enough, especially in a city like LA, because for $2 million, you can barely buy a house. You buy a house in Chicago, whatever, it costs $1 million. You kind of don't have enough money, and I don't want to be like 50 years old and still like playing the fucking World Series, right? So I think the struggle for me over the last couple of years was I need to find a job, and I need to reinsert myself into this traditional sense of society where I work a finance job, or I go to business school and I become a consultant. But at the same time, it's really hard to go from like poker to real life. It's just such a weird transition, because there are two types of people. There's people that are like, oh my God, like at the age of 25, you had already made $1 million, or like you've won like every live tournament, like you've won like whatever, a bracelet and a WPT and an EPT, like that's kind of remarkable. And then at the same time, you meet other people who are just like, oh, do you know Jamie Gold? Or like people that say, like, people that don't value your time, right? Like there's people that'll like invite me to stuff on Sundays, like for all of eternity, right? Like it feels like, and I'm just like, no, Sundays are, I work on Sundays. And they're like, whatever, just don't work on Sunday. And I'm like, I can't go to like a lawyer and be like, whatever, just skip your trial, right? Like,
Yeah.
or like, you have people that are like, oh, how much money did you make? Like, I don't ask like someone who works in advertising how much money they made for a campaign they did for Google. But like, it's such a like the way you make your earning feels like, it feels like to other people, to certain people, you're not doing anything, and it feels kind of disrespectful, right? And so that's always like an obstacle for me, where I'm just like, I can make more money than some of my friends, but like it does to them, it feels like, oh, you're just doing like, you're doing that thing on the side where you made money, right? Like it never gets fully accepted as like a form of employment, even though we live in 2020 now, where like there's fucking people that are Instagram influencers that are like, I don't consider that really a form of employment, but really, honestly, it is, right? Those people make a lot of fucking money. Non-traditional jobs have been around for quite a while now, but they're still not respected as much as traditional jobs. So I think the biggest obstacle, personally for me in this moment, and probably for the last couple of years, is how to get out of poker and how to get a job, but also to get a job where I feel like all the stuff I did for the last decade, like I can translate it over, or at least I can go into an environment where people respect it more than just treat it like, oh, this guy, he just either didn't want to get a job, because like you associate it with like, oh, all those stoner kids that play poker, or you kind of associate poker with all the like, oh, my friend's cousin plays poker and he's really good. Do you know him? Like, but in reality, you're like, no, I was like, by all accounts, like statistically one of the best people to play the game, and like in the top 0.1 percentile, but it's not really that easy to separate it from anyone else that just picks up a deck of cards or picks up some chips and stuff, right? So like it's always been an obstacle personally for me to be like, not that like I'm not doing something meaningful, it's that people don't think you're doing something meaningful, and that all the experience I gained, and all the like financial freedom, even if it after a while it kind of goes away, and all the like life lessons I learned, and like being able to travel to all these countries, it kind of doesn't mean anything in the real world. But then like I'll apply to finance jobs and I'll sit at interviews and I'll be like, the person interviewing me is so fucking incompetent, but because they went to Yale and they started working at this company from 21 and now they're 35 and they still work there, people are just used to that person being that person instead of hiring someone new, because most people are actually just incompetent. And and most people in poker are incompetent. Like if I go to the bike to play a 3,500 WPT, I'm just like, how do these people function in real life? But then I kind of ask myself the same question, like, how would I function in real life? Because I'm so used to like being on my own and making my own decisions and sitting in front of a computer for 12 hours. So I think that obstacle's probably been there my whole poker career, being like, what am I going to get out of this? And I think that that's what a lot of poker players struggle with, and they unfortunately don't always come to a conclusion. But I think that I think most of the offers I got, most of the interviews I went to, I knew very quickly, like, I can't work here because there's just no way to understand what I've done for the last decade. But then sometimes you'll go and people will just be like, oh yeah, like, let's just give him the job because he clearly figured it out already and he'll be fine. I think that in society that feels like it should happen more often. Like, I actually think that if you are very successful at one thing and competent enough and you can pass certain tests, you kind of should get a leash to try to figure it out, as opposed to like the traditional method of like I finished high school, I finished college, like I'm gonna now take a chance on me when you haven't proven anything in other venues, I guess. I don't know. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does. I obviously I worked in the rail industry for 20 years, so, and I got to a senior management position, but you always, it doesn't matter how senior you get, you've always got somebody telling you what to do. Even when you got to the CEO, you've got the board telling you what to do. And then what I found it really difficult to work underneath somebody who didn't have my values and I couldn't respect. And and if the company's values and mission was against my own as I was maturing, I found that intolerable to the point of depression. Because you're like, well, I have to do this for my family, and the fear of trying something else after 20 years is just so encompassing.
Yeah.
Especially if I got people relying on me, which you do with Sasha, for example. So I get it completely. And with the COVID thing right now, I most of my money comes from the work I do on the Triton Poker Tour, and there's no Triton Poker Tours, right?
Yeah.
So I'm like, fuck. And then they just said to me, no, you don't worry about it. We'll get through this together. And, and I was like, wow,
That's really nice. Yeah.
Yeah. Cause so I totally get where you're coming from. And I think it's very brave of you to not stay in your path of least resistance.
Yeah.
And think about trying to carve out a new one.
I'm fortunate in the sense that financially, no one is actually really dependent on me. Like my mom's cost of living is super low, and now she has probably gonna have Social Security and like whatever like small expenses she has now that her house and everything's paid off. That's fine. I'm smart enough to save for that. So I'm fortunate enough that like I can just be like, hey Sasha, I'm going to New York for 2 weeks. I have these 4 job interviews, and she's supportive enough to the point where she's like, yeah, like go ahead, like you just kind of do whatever you want. And like I'm also fortunate enough that like I didn't have to accept the first job offer, right? Like I can just be like, okay, you know what? Like I don't want to live in New Jersey and work for this company because like I just don't want to live in New Jersey, right? Like would I live in New York? Yeah, but even then you have to get paid so much more money for the cost of living there, right? So like I do have the like luxury of being like, oh, I can go work for a startup and like not have to sweat it financially because no one's really dependent on me to make like 150K a year or something, which is probably a luxury that most people don't have, which is probably why I've been pretty picky. But yeah, just I think you hit it like pretty perfectly, like working for someone that doesn't share your values, or like working under someone that you are more competent than or more like just smarter than, is so infuriating because like you're just like, I can get this done and you're still making more money than me. Like when I worked at JP Morgan for like 6 to 7 weeks after college, and I was working 80 hours a week and the people above me were golfing. And I was like, this is kind of shitty. Like I understand they worked 80 hours a week when they were younger, but it's still kind of shitty to be like, you're making so much money and you're just golfing. Like, why does the CEO of United Airlines make $80 million a year or $40 million a year? Like, is he really doing that much more than if you hired one that made $3.5 million a year? Like, I don't believe in full on socialism, but at the same time, it is really shitty when like someone like Bob Iger can buy a sports team because he ran ABC, when like, would he have not ran ABC for half the money that he got paid? Like, what makes like some of these salaries so outrageous, right? Like, I'm not like a big Bernie guy, but like, there's just certain things in society where just like,
you have to, you can't keep quiet about it. You can't keep quiet about it because that's not the way you are. I mean, for me on the railway, because I was the youngest person to always do something. So I was like the youngest supervisor. I was the youngest manager. I was the youngest person to put on a director track ship, right? Because of that, I always got the lowest salary. And they would always say to me, what are you on about? You're only fucking 22.
Yeah, which is just like, I'm doing more than them.
I'm like, I'm fucking setting the world alight. What are you on about? Like, you know, and it's like, no. You're lucky you've got the, and it used to piss me off a little bit. So
I get it. You're worth more than your age. Like, pay me what I'm worth. Like,
and that there is a massive freedom with them becoming freelance or whatever you want to call it. But that doesn't mean to say, and I have to be reminded of this a lot because the railway damaged me. There are some wonderful companies out there with some wonderful people and some wonderful ethos that that you can really respect. And so, you know, that is what I would be looking for one day in the future if I had to do that. But, you know, who knows? I think you're really brave. So what is your treasure then? So like every hero eventually gets their treasure, whether that's the Holy Grail or Rocky winning his title or whatever. You had the Triple Crown in poker. Like, answer this question twofold then. What was the treasure when you was in poker? Did you hit it before you left? Are you going to leave without hitting whatever that treasure is? And what do you think your treasure is now outside of poker? What would you like to do?
Good question. Outside of poker, probably just to be really good at what I do after. So like if I get a finance job, just to actually just be really good at it, because I just feel like that's just the only gear I kind of know, whether it's from education or from poker. You know what? It's funny. Winning the Triple Crown, like I honestly, because of the way my moods are, I wasn't like, all right, we fucking did it, let's celebrate. It's kind of like, all right, like check that off my list kind of. I don't know. I think the treasure is just probably meeting as stupid as it sounds, or as cliche as it sounds, is meeting the people along the way, like meeting someone like Sasha through poker, or being able to give my mom like financial freedom in whatever little way, or making friends, like being able to go to Greece with Athanasios and just randomly meeting his like cousins and being like, oh, like, look at that. Like, or like, you know, like just meeting people and their significant others, or like meeting you and being like, hey Lee, let's go get coffee. Like, I guess meeting interesting people along the way that I like to spend time with is probably what I think I got most out of it. Because I do have friends that are in finance that work like 18 hours a week still to the age of 35, and they come home and they like play with their kid and they go to bed and they do it all over again. So like knowing that I can just like, oh, I don't want to play poker this week. Like, all right, let's go like do something. Like knowing, I think all the freedom that I had was probably the treasure, like having time to myself, like having the luxury of like going to a wedding, in like a friend's wedding, and not having to worry about work. Knowing that I don't have to go to, it took me a while, but I don't have to play every tournament. Like, oh, just because there's a Sunday Million, I don't have to play it every Sunday. Like once I realized, oh, my ROI is 100%, I'm foregoing $215. It's fine. I'm not going to win it probably ever. Right. Like I don't have to go to Monte Carlo this year. Like after I won it, I was like, I got to go every year, defend my title. And then after like 3 years, I was like, I don't have to travel to all these tournaments. I don't have to wake up and play every World Series event. Like knowing that I don't have to do these things when other people kind of have to do their jobs all the time is probably the thing. And then like knowing that like some of my first poker friends are still like people I'll like hop on a Zoom chat and play board games with during this quarantine. It's kind of nice. It's kind of nice that they have the same like poker struggles, where they're like, oh man, I'm running so bad today. and at the same time I can like be like, all right, let's open a bottle of wine and play code names or whatever. I think that's probably the treasure. And long term, if I end up doing something else, which I hope I do, but I've been saying for probably a decade that I'm going to do, just being good at it, knowing that like I can never make enough money from poker to like live in a place like LA, New York, San Francisco, that I actually kind of have to do something else to live the way I want to live, as basic as it is. Because like, I know personally for me, I'm not going to go to the Commerce Casino and grind out 10-20 cash. It's just not in my DNA. I know I'm not going to wake up every day and play tournaments online. It's just not in my DNA. I can't fucking play every WPT. I can play the ones in LA, the ones in Vegas. Honestly, those are probably the only ones I play anymore. Like pre-30, sure, whatever. It's like going away for a weekend to go to Jacksonville sounds fine when you're 29 years old. But when you're 34 or 35 years old and only getting older, like knowing I'm never going to be able to do those things, and knowing the variance in poker and the fact that I can't get the buy-ins that I feel comfortable playing, and like I'm not going to be 100% motivated to play the smaller ones, and I'm not going to be 100% motivated to play the bigger ones because I don't have 100% of myself or whatever the situation is. Knowing those things, I know that like for me, long-term income from poker is just not there, right? Like this isn't pre-Black Friday where I could make $500,000 playing online poker 3 days a week like people did. This is the new reality where like you have to really be the best of the best. And I don't mind being the best of the best and working on being the best of the best, but I don't want to have to do it every single day. And you kind of really have to want to do it every day. You kind of really have to want to like show up to every single tournament and give it your all. And it's just not like right now, who's like the best player right now is probably like the person with the biggest results right now is like Alex Foxen, for example, right? He plays every time you log online, he's playing like 6 a.m. or 8 p.m. or if there's a good 5K, he's in. If there's a good 500, he's in. Like, I can't do that, right? Like I never did it. Even when I was 25, I didn't do it. Like it was just kind of one of those things. So like knowing that I know I don't have the poker in me and I don't know how long, like eventually the fish keep dying out and you need new fish, and like relying on that 5-10 years down the line, I don't want to do that. So the new treasure would probably be to find something I love, even if it's like working at a startup and making 120K a year with equity. Probably would rather do that now and forego the opportunity cost of financial money I could make playing poker. Whereas like when I was in my 20s, it made no sense. But now if you were like, you can make 200K a year playing poker, you can make 120K a year working at this finance firm, I'd be like, I'll take the 120 because I know that there's a chance that could lead to more. Whereas the 200, I would have to win major poker tournaments, and they just don't exist in the way that they used to. There's just no Monte Carlo $2 million for first place anymore. It's 500K for first, and the buy-in's half of what it is, and the hotel's still $700 a night.
Still 15 euros for a bottle of water.
Yeah, it's not like you can't go there and win life-changing money anymore.
No, if you want to win a major tournament and you want to defend your title, Monte Carlo is not the not the one.
Like really, there's LAPC, there's Bellagio, there's the WSOP main event. Even like a 1,500 bracelet I wanted was what, 300K for first. I feel like those things were like $1 million back in the day, right? Or like 700, 800K. So like, what are you going to win? Like, you can't. You can win the 10K Aria in June. It was like $1 million for first, but in all honesty, you're never going to be in for one bullet. So it's really realistically a $20,000 to $40,000 tournament. At which point you're going to have to start selling action. And at which point, when you win, you're not going to win $1 million, right? And then you got taxes and all that shit too. So like, it just doesn't exist. There's no $10,000 free $5.
No, and if you want to go up to 25K and above, then you've got to be 100 and you got to be 100% into it. You got to be
like
passion, variance,
or those guys. They're just fucking into it. They're just under, and like even then, the issue is you're winning millions of dollars, but you're really not, because you're only getting a fraction of that money, and you still have to be like, yeah, I won $10 million last year playing poker, but in reality, you didn't, right? Like still have that whole thing. It's just like, I had the ego and I did play them, but at some point I was fortunate enough that like it kind of, the passion died out on me enough that I didn't care for it as much. Not to take anything away from those guys. They're better than me. They've been working on it for the last 5 years or 10 years, way harder than I have. And that's good for them.
Yeah.
I'm fine being in an industry where I think there's probably 20 people that are just that much better than me. But at the same time, they go through downswings and shit like that too. And it's just every year, like one guy gets really hot, wins all the tournaments, and then the next 3 years you don't hear from him. And like, that's just kind of what it is. Like, that's just poker. It's just kind of, you kind of want to find something else to do, but at the same time, you kind of like really enjoy the freedom that it gives you. Yeah.
Well, I hope that you find the right balance. I hope you get what you do. I think you're very brave for trying it at least, and I hope it works out for you. It's been a real pleasure having you on the Hero's Journey, Mohsin.
Yeah, that was great. Good luck with the Korean.